At exactly 2:17 a.m., every boys' hostel reported the same thing. Different states, different years, the same presence, watching, listening, learning. I never believed in haunted places. I believed in pressure, exhaustion, and young minds breaking under isolation. I believed fear was created, not discovered. That belief lasted until the night I came across a collection of forgotten hostel incident reports. They were not rumors or student gossip. They were official documents, unfinished, unsigned, and quietly buried. Every report described disturbances inside boys' hostels across America. Different states, different years, yet the details were disturbingly similar. Lights going out at the same hour, footsteps in empty corridors, and something that didn't scare immediately, but waited, observed, and learned. Boys' hostels are different from homes. They are places where teenagers live without comfort, without family, and without anyone truly watching over them. At night, when laughter fades and doors close, the buildings feel hollow. Sounds travel farther. Shadows last longer. Psychologists say fear grows in isolation. But after reading those files, I began to wonder if isolation was not creating fear, but feeding something else. The first case came from a boys' hostel just outside Dayton, Ohio. The building stood alone, surrounded by dead trees and cracked pavement. It was constructed in 1968, never intended for students. Originally, it housed factory laborers working night shifts. When the factory shut down, the building remained. Guards were hired to protect it, but none stayed long. By the late 1980s, it was converted into a boys' residential hostel for a technical institute and renamed Hawthorne Residence. The name changed. The behavior inside did not. In the fall semester, a 17-year-old student named Ethan Miller moved in. He was quiet, observant, and not easily shaken. When he was assigned room 217, the clerk paused before handing him the key. It was a hesitation so brief that Ethan almost missed it, but not entirely. That hesitation followed him down the corridor and stayed with him through his first night. At exactly 2:17 in the morning, Ethan woke up. There was no nightmare and no sound to explain it. He simply opened his eyes, fully alert, with the unshakable feeling that something was happening. The corridor light outside his room turned on by itself. A moment later, footsteps echoed through the hallway. They were slow, deliberate, and heavy, neither hurried nor careless. Whoever was walking knew exactly where they were going. The footsteps stopped directly outside Ethan's door. There was no knock, no breathing, just a pressure in the air, like someone standing inches away, listening. After what felt like minutes, the footsteps moved on. When morning came, Ethan stepped into the corridor and noticed muddy footprints leading away from his door. He followed them to the end of the hallway, where they disappeared straight into a brick wall. There was no door, no crack, just solid brick, cold to the touch. Far colder than it should have been. Room 217 had a reputation the administration refused to acknowledge. Students assigned there never lasted long. Some transferred schools, some dropped out entirely. One boy had stayed nearly 3 weeks before breaking down in the middle of the night, ringing the emergency system repeatedly. When staff reached him, they found him curled under the bed, shaking, whispering the same sentence again and again. "It doesn't knock anymore." On Ethan's third night, his roommate woke up screaming. Not shouting, screaming in pure terror. He claimed a tall figure had been standing at the foot of the bed. It had no face, no features, just a darker shape within the darkness. That same night, the door of room 217 opened by itself. No one entered. By morning, deep scratches had appeared on the wooden floor inside the room. The message was clear and intentional. Stay quiet. He hears you. Soon, students began reporting a bell ringing late at night. It was soft, metallic, and always came before something went wrong. The strange part was that the hostel had no bell system. Still, the sound appeared in report after report, always mentioned with the same timestamp. 2:17 a.m. Ethan lasted only 2 weeks. On his final night, the bell rang again. This time, he heard words spoken clearly from the corridor. Don't wake them. The lights turned on. Footsteps moved past his door, continuing down the hallway. For the first time, they didn't stop at room 217. They stopped somewhere else. By morning, another room was empty. The Ohio hostel officially shut down years later. No supernatural explanation was ever recorded. But locals still claim that lights turn on inside the abandoned building, that footsteps echo through empty corridors, and that no one goes near it after dark. Years later, when investigators compared reports from different states, one detail stood out above all others. Every incident connected to the Ohio hostel ended at the same time, 2:17 a.m. That exact timestamp would later appear again in Texas, in Massachusetts, in California, and in places that were never reported at all. The next set of reports came from Texas, and unlike Ohio, these files were not old. They were recent enough that some of the names had been blacked out instead of erased. The hostel was located near Abilene, built for boys attending a private technical academy. On paper, it was modern, clean, and safe. What made it unusual was its location. The building stood less than 100 feet from a railway line that had officially been abandoned since the early 1950s. No trains were scheduled to pass there. No engines were maintained. According to transportation records, the tracks were dead. Students disagreed. From the first month the hostel opened, boys reported hearing trains late at night. Not every night, but often enough to become routine. The sound always came after lights out, a low vibration through the walls, metal grinding against metal, and then a horn that didn't sound mechanical, but strained, as if it were being forced out of something that no longer worked properly. The sound always reached its peak at 3:40 a.m. At first, the staff blamed imagination, Texas winds, old metal expanding and contracting. But the complaints didn't stop. Boys described the same details without ever comparing notes. The horn always sounded too close. The vibration always traveled through the floor, not the air. And when the sound stopped, the silence that followed felt heavier than before, like the building was holding its breath. Marcus Lee arrived during the winter semester. He was practical, skeptical, and openly dismissive of the stories. He joked about ghost trains and teased his roommates for flinching when the sound came. But Marcus noticed something that others ignored. The sound never came from the tracks themselves. It came from slightly behind them, deeper in the desert, where nothing had ever been built. One night, after the horn sounded again, Marcus and 2 other boys decided to investigate. They waited until the vibration passed through the walls and slipped outside through a side exit. The desert air was cold, unusually still. The tracks lay ahead of them, rusted and half buried in sand. No train, no movement, Yet the ground beneath their feet continued to tremble faintly, as if something had just passed through and left its weight behind. Then the horn sounded again. This time, it came from directly behind them. One of the boys collapsed immediately, as if his legs had simply stopped working. Marcus felt something rush past him. Not air, not wind, but a cold pressure shaped like a body. It passed through his chest and left his skin burning where it touched. The vibration stopped instantly. The desert went silent. They didn't speak on the way back. The boy who collapsed never fully recovered. He remained conscious but distant, staring at nothing for hours at a time. He refused to sleep in his bed again. When asked why, he whispered that the train had no doors, and yet something still got off. After that night, the hostel changed. Boys began waking up with black dust on their pillows and hands. It wasn't soot. It didn't smear. It felt dry, almost like fine ash mixed with sand. Cleaning staff found the same substance collecting near the windows, even though they were sealed shut. One student decided to record audio while he slept, hoping to prove the sounds were real. When he played it back the next morning, there was no train, no horn. Instead, there were voices, low, layered whispers that overlapped each other, repeating phrases that made no sense at first. When the audio was slowed down, the words became clearer. "Get off the tracks. You missed your stop. Ride again." The boy disappeared during winter break. His family claimed he never returned home. His belongings remained untouched in his room. When staff entered days later, his bed was still warm, as if someone had just stood up from it. The reports grew more disturbing. Boys claimed they felt movement beneath their mattresses at night, like something shifting below them, adjusting its position. Others reported dreaming of long corridors filled with sand and metal, where something massive moved beside them without ever being seen. Then came the timestamp. Several incidents were logged at 3:40 a.m., but buried deeper in the files were smaller notes, handwritten and barely legible. Notes that mentioned another time, a time that appeared only after the worst incidents. 2:17 a.m. Marcus experienced it on his final night. He woke suddenly, the way Ethan had in Ohio, with no sound to explain it. His room was vibrating softly. The digital clock read 2:17. From somewhere beneath the building, he heard movement. Not a train, but something repositioning itself, as if it were preparing to rise. The horn did not sound that night. Instead, a voice spoke clearly from inside the room, close enough to feel. Not this one. Marcus left the hostel the next morning and never returned. Years later, he admitted that whatever passed through him that night had taken something with it. He could no longer remember certain faces, certain emotions. He said it felt like parts of him were still riding something that never stopped. The Texas hostel was demolished quietly in the early 1990s after multiple investigations failed to explain the disturbances. The railway tracks were removed soon after, but locals still avoid the area. They say the ground vibrates late at night, and that sometimes footprints appear in the sand, long parallel marks that lead nowhere and disappear by morning. When investigators later compared the Ohio and Texas files, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Different environments, different phenomena, same behavior. Whatever was present did not stay in one place. It followed structures where boys slept together, where routines repeated, where nights were predictable, and always, before it appeared completely, it listened. The next set of reports came from Massachusetts, and by then, it was no longer just observing.